Welcome back to the High Performance Hub podcast. Today I am joined by close friend and therapist Brad Jones. What we're going to be doing today is diving deep into his journey with substance abuse, mental health, and how he's using that to change people's lives. Brad, welcome, my mate.
Pleasure to be here.
I know this first question is quite loaded, mate, but let's give everyone a bit of a backstory to how that journey for you started.
Okay. Well, just to kind of, obviously you've heard this story before and you've heard it in more of like the long form. So I'll try and break it down to like the Cliff Notes version as much as I can. But really where it all started for me is probably around like 13, 14 years old. For me, I just felt like this general sense of discontentedness. And, I think depending on who you ask, whether it's someone in the mental health field, someone in the substance abuse space, like there's a bunch of different labels for what that is. Some people would call it depression. Some people would call it soul sickness. But regardless, it's kind of all the same thing. Like for me, like I grew up in like a good neighborhood, good family. Like I didn't really have any like acute capital T kind of trauma to really pinpoint as to why I felt this way. And so for me, like the minute I found like substances of any kind, whether it's weed, alcohol, 2CI, 2C, like whatever I could get my hands on, like the minute I could find something that could like change the way I felt and the way I looked at the world, it just kind of made sense. It's funny because, and I remember I was telling you this when I first told you this story, like I got bad grades growing up, and the minute I started doing drugs, like I did way better at everything, which is kind of like the opposite of like what you'd expect most people's story to be. So for me, it was just like, oh, I found this one thing and now I balanced out the equation in my head and now I can function just like everybody else. And so from there, it just grew and developed and progressed to the point where by the time I was 17, I was pretty much totally physically dependent on opioids. And this was like back in like kind of the height of the opioid crisis. Before it was kind of in the fentanyl crisis we're in right now. This was more in like the place of like when it was Oxycontin leading to eventually heroin. And so for me, I was generally a high-functioning drug addict for the most of my use. I got through 4 years of college using drugs every day when I showed up for orientation, and I walked away with my cap and gown using drugs that day as well. And so for me, like I thought I'd like cracked the code on like how to be a high-functioning drug addict. And but I think for most of us, and I think there's a lot of people I've met over the years who've had a similar story to that, if you have a high-functioning drug addict card, once it gets revoked, you're not going to get it back. Like, so it goes from being like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm handling my business, to everything falls apart relatively quickly. And so by the time I was 22, I think, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I was back in my parents' house, which for like a 22-year-old man who's like was used to being independent at that point was a hit to the ego. And, eventually I got your kind of classic intervention situation kind of happened. And I was given the option to go get help or get out and figure it out on my own. And for me, at least for a brief period of time, I chose to go out and figure it out on my own. And so I gathered whatever resources I could and bounced around for a little while. And I think the only story that I really want to expand on, because I think it's kind of that inflection point where, like, at least maybe not like the change that needed to stay sober happened, but at least it was like that first kind of perspective change to maybe start that process happened. It was, I was trying to get a ride. I was kind of stuck somewhere and I had a place to stay that night. So I was trying to kind of finesse a ride. And, at this time, like my parents were just kind of like, taking a step back, because at that stage I'd put them just through absolute hell. And I remember I called my mom, and she actually agreed to come pick me up. And I don't think she told my dad, because to be honest, my dad would not have been happy about that at that time. And so she came and she picked me up, and she basically told me in the car while she was giving me a ride that like, listen, like, this is it. Like, at this stage in the game, like, I have to make a choice, and the choice that I have to make is to wash my hands of you. And having you in my life is so painful because you don't want to get better, that it's easier to just not have you in my life at all. And this next part is it's funny because when I go to meetings sometimes I say this story often, and when I say it in a meeting with other people who are in recovery, it's they find it hilarious. But when I say it to like regular people, maybe people who haven't gone through some of these things, it's just sad and tragic. But my mom gave me, as like a last parting gift, she gave me a loaf of Wonder Bread and a jar of Jif peanut butter and a plastic knife, because obviously I wasn't eating. I was spending all the money I could on drugs at that time. And it's funny because, like, you know, you think about your parents, you think about relationships, and you think about like unconditional love, and you also kind of realize, like, when you're that stuck in something that's that self-destructive and also destructive to the people who care about you most, like pushing people who would previously do anything for you to the only thing they're willing to sacrifice is probably at the time like only worth like $8 at Walmart, and that's it. And from there, I bounced around to some treatment centers, and I spent about a year and 3 months back to back in different treatment centers of different types. And eventually I got sober. I got into the field kind of by accident. I was actually planning on going back to law school. Like, I had my LSAT books. I was getting ready to test. Like, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just know, lawyers make money, I think. So that's what I'm going to do. And at the time, a mentor of mine was just like, listen, like, you need a job while you study. Like, why don't you apply for like an internship at this treatment center just as like a tech, dispensing meds, making sure people are where they're supposed to be and stuff like that. And I got into it, and I loved it. And I found a true passion for it and working with people. And eventually, I decided to just take a hard pivot, and I went and got my master's. And since then, I've gotten my license to practice, and I've been a therapist. I've been a clinical director. I've done street outreach in Skid Row for a couple of years in Los Angeles. And so, it's been an interesting journey, to say the least, but, I think everything worked out exactly as it needed to.
Yeah, I think an interesting journey is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah.
But you mentioned about you fell in love with it, with that first opportunity that you had. What was it that kind of made you fall in love with it? Was it being back in that environment, but on the other side of it, being able to make a difference?
Well, yes, absolutely. I think if I can kind of sum it up in like one word, I'd say it's service. I think that's a big part of being able to get this thing and get sober in any way, shape, or form, because I think like when you're in addiction, like when you're in active addiction, like all you're consumed by are thoughts of like self, like what do I need? How can I feel better? It's always about me. Like you can't escape just like all these kind of like really self-focused thoughts all the time, because you can't really see outside that framework. And I think to get into a place where like it's not really about me, like the conversations I have with patients today, like it's not about me at all. It's always about them, and to get out of like my head and to get out of like what I want, what I need, all the things we can get consumed by in a day, and make it about the needs of another person. And to make it even better for me is like all the things that typically a person would be ashamed of or hard on themselves about, those become your greatest tools for helping another person. Because whether or not you talk about your history, people can feel and pick up on like whether you've been through something or whether you've experienced something just by the way you speak to it. And I think all these things that I've gone through becoming actually the biggest assets, that's also a big part of what keeps me doing it.
Yeah, and with these conversations that you have with clients and stuff, in a way it's similar with how I coach. It's not saying like this will work for you, but it's being vulnerable enough to be like, this is how I got through something similar to what you're going through right now.
Right.
So showing vulnerability, but also just being listened to and understood,
right,
are huge.
Right.
And when you open up to someone, it breaks down those barriers and allows them to feel safe. Because the conversations that I have with my clients are going to be completely different to the conversations you have with yours. And they're going to be a lot more, well, with all the information that you've just shared, surrounding similar information. So opening up about addiction, mental health, it's tough, but I think that stems from you. Like I wouldn't feel safe opening up to someone that I didn't want to.
Right.
So it's creating that space.
Right.
How do you do that with people with different cultures, different languages, different beliefs?
I think just one word again comes to mind, and I think you have to come at it from a space of humility. Like from like a personal perspective and also from like a clinical perspective, it's like I may have a bunch of knowledge about this, that, or the other of like what the client's going through. But also I think coming from a place of humility of just like, but I don't know your experience, and really just being curious about wanting to understand their experience, because I think, there's a ton of therapists who probably have all the book knowledge, all the clinical skills that they need to, but also like, to be honest, like it's really just how you approach it. Because if someone tries to like summarize your life, how you feel, maybe your fears, your insecurities, the barriers that are stopping you from where you want to go, and they're approaching it in like an academic way or like a textbook way, that's not going to make you feel comfortable. And so really just coming at it from a perspective of just like, okay, sure, I may know this, though, this, that, or the other, but I'm just going to walk in, especially to that first session, and just be curious and ask questions and just genuinely just be present with another human being in their experience. I think that's the doorway to be able to connect.
100%. I think connection is something that is getting lost, especially in today's day and age, with all the social media. So when you are opening up, that connection is vital. And I know previously you've mentioned about working with like kind of athletes and stuff like that. Do you think that their approach to it is a bit more kind of resistant with the athlete side, because they've been like, their mindset is just train, perform, compete, and then when they have to kind of lower their ego, which I think is a big thing for everyone that wants to get help, they need to drop the ego.
Right. Well, and I think there is definitely some truth to that, because ultimately, like, what is like if you're in like a competitive sport, especially at like a professional level, right? Like, mind over matter is kind of like a genuine principle of just pushing. But like when you're dealing with like psychological and like emotional issues and the effect and toll that takes, whether it's from their job as an athlete or whether it's from like their own personal history, right? Like, you can't always just wrestle your mind into submission. And so I think a big piece is, and especially like just in the culture of athletes, right? Like, vulnerability is not always encouraged. It's not, and it's not usually an asset in what they do, at least for some, right? And so I think it feels a little bit counterintuitive for them, but at the same time, I think the thing that I oftentimes find really amazing about working with athletes, especially high performance ones, is that discipline and consistency piece is there, which for a lot of patients that I work with is not. So as long as you give them kind of like the roadmap, they can kind of take it and run with it.
Yeah, I think, well, all the golfers, I know professional rugby players, like a lot of sports people now have their own psychologist to get them through the game and understand themselves, their mentality, in how to keep performing at a higher level every single time.
Right.
And that's no different, in my opinion, to the average Joe walking down the street.
Right.
Like the mind is a muscle, and like I've mentioned to you before, like I've had my own therapy journey, and a lot of people that I know now are starting therapy. And it's not because of previous trauma, it's just, well, some people it might be. But it's learning how to, in a way, unlock more of your brain to improve the relationship with yourself, to keep allowing yourself to progress.
Right.
And for me, therapy is single-handedly changed my life.
Yeah.
My advice to anyone would be to have, not even with a therapist, but find someone to have those conversations with. Like when we were in LA visiting you guys, me and you sat on the sofa and I was like, this could have been a podcast. Because it's just two lads speaking with all ego dropped, just having a chat.
Right.
And we don't do that enough.
Yeah. Well, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think one thing you touched on is like, it doesn't have to be like this like acute trauma that warrant. And I feel like a lot of people, and I feel like that's been kind of the stigma about therapy, is like something has to be wrong, or something has to be broken, or I have to feel like it's broken in order to want to engage with it. But I think understanding yourself, especially like understanding your history, right? Like wherever we go, there we are. And so we're always bringing our history in ways that like, it's like a fish being in water. A fish doesn't perceive that it is in water because it's just in it all the time. And for us, like we're bringing our past, all of our baggage, whether big or small, in subtle ways that we can't perceive, to everything that we do, and that can be like in our relationships, friendships with family, and like as you and I were talking about in LA, like how that shows up like in work, and we can't even see like how like these little pieces from our past are actually creating like these barriers that we're kind of seeing today.
Yeah. And just from like knowing you and speaking to you and obviously doing this and the conversations that we've had, I know how much you care and love what you do. And something that I sometimes struggle with is leaving emotion at the door. And what I mean by that is, for example, clients have lost loved ones or they're going through a really difficult time. And then just being able to, even though that is work comes with me all the time, but trying to close that when I shut the office door and leave it in that room. How do you deal with that, with the problems that you face, the conversations that you have, to then go home and be able to be calm, level-headed without those thoughts, those conversations like kind of circling around your head?
A lot of it, I think the biggest piece is like I have to do the things that work for me to take care of myself, and I think like in that includes therapy. I think every therapist, like I just consider it best practice for every therapist to have their own therapist, and that doesn't mean that you're in it all the time, but it means you have one. And if you need to get in, if you start having those kind of alarm bells ringing that you're taking on too much from the work that you're doing, it's probably time to go back in. But I think it's a delicate balance, because I think you get exposed to enough of this stuff, it's very easy over time, if you aren't mindful of it, to become desensitized. And so it's a balance of like, okay, how do you not take all this stuff on? Because that is just so unfeasible long term. But also at the same time, not overcorrect and go to this place where like you're shut off to like the emotions of other people's experiences, because that's a big part of the work, is being able to connect to their emotional experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's, for me, not giving, like, reading a message or receiving something and looking at it and like, right, how can we tackle this head on, but with humility.
Right.
And with showing that I actually deeply do care.
Right.
And it's giving it enough emotion that it's like you're showing your support, you're showing like the next actionable steps to move forward.
Right.
But not enough where it affects the rest of my whole day.
Correct.
And that's genuinely taken me about 5 years to do.
Right. Well, and I think that's also comes with like practice, and especially with anything that you're doing, like if you're passionate about it, I think it comes with like some time and some wisdom, right? Because I think like, especially like when I got into the field, like I was so like every single person, like it was just 100% like emotional investment all the time. And I still put in that investment, but I had no kind of like, I hadn't developed myself enough to have like those own internal boundaries. So like when, you know, and oftentimes it does with people like struggling with the kind of issues that I'm oftentimes working with, like when things go sideways or like there's a big blow up or something tragic happens. Like I remember in the early years, like every single one just took it out of me, and it took so long to bounce back. And so that's actually a big reason why, like, after getting sober, like, I got back into therapy, is like, okay, like, how can I, like, be present with people? How can I engage with people at the level that I want to, and to be as effective as I want to be, but also at the same time safeguard, like, myself, so, like, I can do this for 20 years and it doesn't just burn me out.
Yeah, and it's also when you learn to navigate that and manage it, you're actually being able to be there for more people more consistently.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why, even though in different fields, why we do what we do, to try and help as many people as possible.
Right.
But if we're taking, term for a better use, but all the baggage from someone,
yes,
when we haven't got any room to then take even more baggage on from the next client or the next person.
Right.
So then our communication, our body language, our tone of voice isn't where it needs to be.
Right.
But circling back, mate, into like becoming sober.
Mm-hmm.
What was that journey like? Again, that is a very loaded question, but is there, because like now, the reason why I'm asking that is because we've been out together,
mm-hmm.
constantly surrounding yourself with alcohol, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't faze you.
Mm-hmm.
Like being in that environment, being with people, like our wives are right behind these cameras and they're currently sipping on a mimosa. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning. But how did you get into that confidence, into being in those situations?
That was definitely a work in progress, and it's like a very incremental process over time. And I think I was telling you this story when you were out visiting us in LA, is, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine who's had some similar struggles some months back, and I remember him asking me, like, just like, you know, like, I don't know if I had anxiety before I stopped using drugs, but I definitely have it now. And it takes time to like acclimate to these certain situations, because you almost have to like learn to like do life and be in situations you know you've been in before all over again, because especially if you're using to that degree, you haven't really felt how you would feel in those situations. So physically you have the memories like, oh, I've been in a bar before. Oh, I've been at this place before. Oh, I've been around people who are really drunk before. But to be honest, when you are using drugs and alcohol like your entire adolescence to adulthood, you've physically been there, but like you have no idea what it feels like to be in that situation and perceive and feel everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was just about being very, very cautious in those situations. Luckily for me, like I didn't have, like my main history was with drugs. So like alcohol was never like a huge draw for me. But I think it's just, especially in those early years, it was like, all right, I got like a good hour. Especially like my wife, like she likes to go out, she likes to do all that stuff. And so when we met, when we were in our early 20s, she was in the prime years of her going out. And so like I would have to like set boundaries at certain times of like, all right, I got 2 hours. I got 2 good hours where I can like go out there, I can like shake hands, like do my best kind of to like socialize.
I've seen it firsthand.
And try and be on the level. Cause like I may appear like I can get on the level of everybody else. Internally, I know that I'm most definitely not on the same level as anybody else. And so it took a lot of time. But I also realized, and this was a hard thing to digest, especially when I was getting sober at like 22, 23, is realizing that like the world around me is going to continue doing what it's doing. And, like people who use drugs recreationally, people who go out and want to drink, like that stuff is like in our social fabric, right? It's there. And so, and I got sober to be able to live my life and go and do things and not live in a sense of like fear. And so I had to just push myself to be in those situations while still being cautious, just slowly over the course of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, to now it's like in most of those situations, I'm comfortable. Granted, I run out of gas a little bit quicker than everybody else, but it's just taken a lot of time to just acclimate to it.
Yeah.
And for anybody who like may be listening, who's getting sober at any point, like I think the key is to not rush that process. I think a lot of people want to just be sober and be in these environments and still have a good time and do all that stuff. But like, I think everybody has a different pace. And for some, it may never be comfortable, and that's okay too. But for me, what worked was just taking a very incremental and cautious approach to it.
Yeah, that links in directly with my previous guest that I told you about before, Jeff Iverson. He got clarity from spending 3 weeks in jail, and then made a commitment to himself. And the first day that he came out of jail, that was the first time he'd spent sober in over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then he woke up the next day and he was like, if I can do it yesterday, I've got a good shot of doing that today.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just like one day at a time, one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had this thing called like future tripping. Don't think about, like 2 years time, 3 years time. Just think about what you can do today.
Mm-hmm.
And then just continuously move forward.
Well, and that is like, it's such a common phrase in like the recovery community. And sometimes like when people like go to meetings or they're in treatment, especially our clients who have been like trying to get this thing for like a long time, like they get really tired of like they feel it's like a cliche, like one day at a time or something like that. But the reason it's a cliche is because it's true. And like for a lot of people that like I work with, like they're in such a rough spot where like sometimes I tell them like, we're not even doing days, we're doing minutes right now.
Wow.
We're fighting for every minute. Let's just get to the next minute and the next one, and let's just start stacking these together because, especially in those early days, like you were describing, like every kind of dial on your like emotions and perception is just cranked up to 11. So it's kind of like everything kind of feels like sandpaper, like life just existing here without something to help it is just like, it can feel really untenable. And so like, I really do agree with that principle. It's just like, we can't project this into the future. The only thing that we have is now, and we just have to get through now.
Yeah. When you were going through so you were jumping about treatment centres for like, was it a year and a half?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just with kind of treatment centres and that kind of community, that let's just call it that, did it feel lonely? Because linking back into like fitness and stuff, it's someone that wants to change their life in any way, to be honest, is lonely, because the only person that can do it is you.
Right.
But they can still outsource help, community groups,
right,
and like-minded individuals that can create kind of this team environment. Because I know the community side of things and having support systems there was massive for Jeff in his recovery.
Right.
Would you say that was an experience that you faced as well?
Yes. Well, and I think because also like when you're walking into recovery, like whether it's your friends or your family, like not everything's in a nice, neat bow. Like when you walk into these places, and so like your relationships are in a mess. In fact, a lot of the people who probably care the most about you have probably put the most distance they ever have between them and you because of what you're doing. And so walking into it, like there is this inherent sense of like being out on an island and feeling that loneliness. And I think similarly to like what your past guest said, is community is like a prerequisite to recovery. Some form of community, and that can look different. That can look like professionals, that can look like other people in the recovery community, that can look like different types of recovery meetings, whatever that may be. But it's very rare to see someone do this on their own, because our thought process is so distorted, even after we remove the drug. In fact, it's probably at its most distorted when you remove the solution of using, because it was a solution for a period of time, and then you're left with just your mindset. But you don't have anything to numb what your mindset is. So those first 6 months, your brain is just attacking you every single day. And sometimes you just need, well, actually, not sometimes, you need other people to just be like, I get it. I understand that. Like, don't like wherever your thoughts are leading you, just keep putting one foot in front of the other and just don't listen to it. And to be honest, like for me, I just wouldn't be here if there wasn't people who put in the time, the energy, dealt with my tantrums and fits. Like if there are people who weren't just patient with me when I was probably at a place where it'd be justifiable to have the least amount of patience for me, I wouldn't have made it. And the crazy part is like some of those people who gave back to me and gave their time, they're not here anymore. They didn't make it. And I realized the gift that I've been given, which is just to be here and have a human experience and not be ensnared into the throes of this thing. And that's why I know it's so important as far as like what I do to like in some small, and whether it's big or small, if I can have like some form of impact on somebody else's journey, like that makes all of it worth it.
Mate, I love that. Yeah, that was powerful. With having that support, like for you personally, could you pinpoint a person, a moment, an experience that someone instilled belief in you that you didn't have yourself?
I had a sponsor as my very first sponsor, and just so the people listening can know a little bit about me. Like I'm an intellectualizer, and I think growing up, I used my ability to when I was using, I would use my ability to communicate, to manipulate, right? And like to continue doing what I was doing. But growing up, I oftentimes used like my like intellect to try and poke holes in things, to try and justify why it isn't worth it to do something, why I shouldn't do that, right? And really, it was just using a strength that I have to ultimately stop me from like progressing or maybe doing things. It was really just to mask fear, right? Because maybe I was I was going to fail. I wasn't going to be able to do something correctly, or maybe I'd look stupid, whatever the insecurity may be, right? And I had a sponsor who was like the total opposite of me, like not an intellectualizer at all, like smart guy, but more on like the streets smart side of things. Like he did some time before, and he's just very straightforward dude. And I remember like I was poking holes in like why I didn't want to do the process, why I thought it was BS or this, that, and the other. And I remember he was just like, listen, man, like what I'm sensing from you is that you're just afraid. And ultimately, I think if you just simplify everything and suspend disbelief for a moment, like stop wanting to have the answers before you even jump into something. And he was just like, if you do this process, like truly give this recovery process your time, energy, and if you do it thoroughly and honestly, and at the other end of it, if your life is the same or worse, just go use again.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just like, oh, I don't have to try and like think of everything. I don't have to try and have all the answers. I don't have to try and like philosophically make everything mesh. Like I realized I can just actually take action and see what comes of it and then figure it out on the back end. And I realized it was so much easier just to start taking steps. And that was a lesson that applied not just in like my recovery, but also in like every aspect of your life. Is sometimes it's just about like, okay, I need to take a leap of faith and I just need to take that first step.
Yeah. I think with everyone that's sat in that chair, it's like that leap of faith or like failing forward is a constant theme. But that leap of faith isn't as scary. I know this is not like undermining what you went through, but when you know it's something that you need to do and you should do and you have to do, that step forward isn't as scary. Even though it might be, you're still just going to fucking take that step.
Right.
And this goes into therapy, it goes into fitness, it goes into business, it goes into every walk of life. So I love that. I really, really do. And one thing that I say to my clients weekly is just keep stacking evidence. And those small steps, exactly what Jeff said. It was just, don't think too far ahead. Just keep stacking it, and they all add up. What would, with you being a client in the past, and still a client like you mentioned,
right,
and now being a therapist, is there any kind of lessons or not so much techniques that you found that you, like the experiences that you went through as a client, that you now transition into being a therapist?
I think for me, a big lesson I learned in therapy, and this is more like, and it wasn't even like almost like a concrete skill, it was more so just like a way to frame life that felt really good for me. And oftentimes, like, because I see a lot of people, especially, and actually more so now, especially with like young men, is like a sense of directionlessness, a sense of being like disconnected from purpose, and like wanting, like craving that purpose, but like it's nowhere to be found, right? And I think for me, I had a therapist being like, if you're waiting for someone to come and tell you what the meaning of your life should be, you're going to be waiting a very long time. And it put it back on me to be like, oh shit, like I have to determine what the purpose is. And the beauty in that is like that can be written in pencil. I can edit that, I can change that, I can make that whatever it needs to be as I kind of like evolve through this process. And I think that's one of my great passions outside of like helping people get out of the acuity of like really serious issues. But I think once they get over the hump, then it's kind of like, okay, like trying to kind of ask the right questions or guide them to like define what feels meaningful for them. Because we don't get sober just to be chemically abstinent. I didn't do this so I could pass a drug test. I did this so I could live a life that feels fruitful and meaningful, and that I'm having experiences that are interesting and have substance. And I think that's the part that I find the most just the most joy in doing.
Yeah, I love that. And for me personally, it's with my kind of therapy journey is understanding my emotions more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being asked the right questions. So sometimes my therapist will just be like, how you feeling? And I'll be like, yeah, all right, mate. And he'll be like, how you feeling? And you just keep digging until he gets the answer and he goes, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
So it's understanding your emotions, and then once you've understood them, you're more aware of them, then you can control them.
Yeah.
So one thing that, and I'm still, my wife will back me up on this, that I am very impatient, but I always try my best just to give it another 5 seconds and give time, as much time for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you would have been in conversations, I think we all have been, when you're in a conversation and the other person's on the phone, they're looking elsewhere, they're just not invested.
Right.
And it's just, if you just give someone an extra 10, 15 seconds, or pause before you reply, let them finish their sentence and then reply, it goes a long, long way.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to being understood, heard, and listened to.
Right.
Which I think is something that everyone can continue to develop.
You would be shocked how much of therapy is less about me saying something poignant, or something insightful. It's not like a Goodwill Hunting where like Robin Williams says like that one thing and then all of a sudden Matt Damon starts crying and then everything's fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes you'd be surprised, like if you just create space for people and they truly feel like you're like bearing witness to whatever's coming up, you'd be surprised how much the answers tend to come up on their own. Some of the most like radical changes I've seen, I've had very little to do with besides creating that space.
Yeah, well, that's a huge skill. But again, just going, like my therapist will ask me a question and he won't say anything. And I've been sat on the call for like 2-3 minutes before. And he's not said a word. And he's like, I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And then he repeats the question. And then I actually think about it instead of, like you were saying before, like intellectually trying to get out of a conversation.
Right.
Like I've tried to do that before.
Right.
And he sees straight through it and he goes,
right.
You're chatting shit.
Right.
Tell me how you really feel.
Right.
And I think I've got a huge time for therapists, and it's a talent, mate. I find it so interesting because one question opens up a whole other network of answers and thoughts.
Well, and it's interesting because like that space highlights like how, as the client, and I can relate to you on this, like we're not actually reflecting. We're like kind of just through muscle memory, just kind of like responding and going through life. Because even just like the question you posed earlier, like, how are you feeling? There's like kind of the canned response we all have, right? Like, oh, I'm good. How are you? Like, it's more of a formality. It's not actually ever really posed as a real question.
Mm-hmm.
And so to actually be asked that question in a real way, I don't know if you had this experience, but for me, it's just like, oh shit, like I have no idea how I felt today. I've been doing stuff. I've been handling business, but I have no clue how I actually feel. And sometimes we have to have that uncomfortable quiet, that uncomfortable space, like in those type of sessions, to really force it back on us to like really like be like, okay, how do I really feel in this moment or throughout this day?
Yeah, and one thing that because I can get in my own head very well. I'm very good at that. My mentor knows me very well, and he was like, right, I want you to start journaling. And for me, that was like, I've got to write about how I feel every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, no, it's more strategic. So say just dump what you've done well, one problem, how you're going to solve it. But through doing that process, and I've been doing it for only 2 weeks now,
Mm-hmm.
but it allows me that daily reflection. So when I have a really poor day, you actually look back and be like, okay, I affected that person positively. I could have improved here. But it allows that constant reflection of not how much work am I doing or how little I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's my performance through that day.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's finding those grey areas where it's like, right, for me, it'll be like, right, move nutrition around slightly so it gives me more of a sustained energy through the day.
Mm-hmm.
And just giving me that routine and constant reflection, which allows me then to improve it the following day.
Right.
And I think reflection with therapy, with fitness, with anything that you do is vital. Because then we're all guilty of having that like Groundhog Day and just going. And then we always say, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe it's September already.
Yeah.
You should be like, well, if you reflect, you'll understand how much you've actually progressed or where you need to put more time, effort, and energy into.
Right. Well, it's very easy to fall into autopilot, where you just kind of like, you have your routine, you have the things that are kind of built in like to your life and the way that you operate. And then it's very easy to just fall into a place where it's like you can just do those things without actually being like really present with them. And I think, it's funny because like, I think it's all therapists like throw out the idea of journaling always, but especially like trying to breach. I'm glad you're open to it, because especially when we try and breach that subject to men, it's like, well, you're going to make me write a diary or something. Like that's always, feelings? That's like, like 80% of the time, that's the response I get. But I think it sounds like your therapist did a great job of like conceptualizing it for you, because like it gets you out of that autopilot. Because it's not that you're just like going through your day or like you're kind of thinking about your day. It's getting your day out of here and actually being able to visualize it and see how it all works together or how it doesn't work together.
Exactly. And in a really weird way, it's actually improved my sleep. Because, well, it's not in a weird way, it makes sense. Because when I have that 10, 15 minutes of writing down everything that I'm worried about, the actual notion of writing it down is effectively getting it out your head. And then when I go to bed, I've got nothing going through my mind like, what didn't I do today? What do I need to do tomorrow? Because it's all on that piece of paper.
Right.
And then I set myself up with my laptop, with my computer, with that first task.
Right.
So everything's got a reason behind it to why I'm doing it.
Right.
And if someone just said to me, oh, journal, I'd be like, no. But when someone says to me, it's strategic and it's going to help because it does X, Y, Z with these following questions.
Right.
With more of a structure behind it, rather than a pen and paper and be like, today I did well. It's like, well, where's the strategy? Like, well, give me some more substance to it.
Right.
So with anything that I do, it needs to be meticulous. I need to see the actionable steps.
Right.
It's like, right, if I do this, what's going to be the outcome?
Right.
And it's not about, I need to do this for 6 months to see the benefits.
Right.
Just do it again today. Do it again tomorrow. You're not going to really feel or see the impact of doing it for 2-3 days.
Right.
It's just compounding that. And it's the same with therapy. It's the same with fucking anything.
Right. Well, it's funny because for like a lot of my clients, I oftentimes use the example of working out to kind of like be able to describe what they're trying to do. Like I'll use an example of like if someone's trying to practice like mindfulness, right? Getting out of their head and trying to be more present in the moment. If you're doing like, let's say you're doing that through like a meditation or something like that, like you're strengthening a muscle in your mind to be able to go from whatever thought you drifted off with, whatever intrusive thought about, oh shit, I got to go do this, I got to go do that, or oh, I fucked that up, whatever it may be. And strengthening that muscle, being like, okay, bringing myself back to the physical moment, whether that's with your breath, whether that's just with the sound in the room, the feeling of the chair, whatever it may be. And it's the same thing as like, and every time I actually teach a client this, they're always just like, this is really hard. Like, this isn't working. And it's just like, it's the same thing as going into a gym. And if you haven't been to a gym for a really long time, you're picking up like a 5-pound weight, right? And the movement is clumsy. Your form's probably terrible. And like, you're probably really hyper fixated on, am I doing this right? Is anybody looking at me? All those kind of insecure thoughts that could pop up. But it's like, you just have to keep practicing. And then week after week after that kind of repetition, you're up to the 10-pound, the form's looking a little bit better, and it's like, oh well, I don't look any different. But then after that, you replicate, and then you start noticing some substantial differences. Like the mind and working around your mind is no different in that way from like trying to take care of your body.
Yeah. With that, it leads us directly into it. For your personal experience with your story, which you've very well documented, what direct correlation have you found between the mental health side and not so much the fitness, but just training, movement?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say was the direct correlation between those, and what have you found?
I think just getting out of your head and being in your body is just as a general principle, however that's achieved. And that could be through something that's strenuous or even just something as simple as walking. But I think just being in a practice of getting out of here and living in here and being in the physical world, being in your physical body, moving it, forcing yourself to be in the moment where nothing else exists, it's huge. I think for like the data's there generally in the research that like, for like generalized anxiety or depression, like being physically active makes a big difference. You can't hinge it as like, I think like with all things, when you're talking about like a person, right? It has to be, it's one facet, a really important facet, but it's one facet of like a bigger solution. Just like, if someone comes to my office and we're having like super insightful conversations and we're doing all this, but they're not building that into a practice outside of it, it means nothing. And so you need all these different aspects, whether that's like your mental and emotional side, like going to therapy, whether that's taking care of your body or just existing in your body by doing physical activity. Like all these things are like the different puzzle pieces you need to just build like really kind of solid mental health.
Yeah. My relationship with, well, half the time, my motivation to train or run or go to the gym is for that release.
Yes.
But I realized my relationship with fitness was negative, because every single time that I struggled, I would then go and beast myself to the point of exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Every single time. Mm-hmm. And then if it wasn't for me actually sitting in my emotions, mm-hmm. and understanding them, and then using fitness, running, lifting, whatever it was, as a bonus, as a reward kind of thing, mm-hmm. not to further kind of damage myself, because it didn't work. And mm-hmm. I've done that for over a decade. Mm-hmm. So then having the two, so working with a therapist and reading, learning, exploring new ways with the mental side of things, has completely changed my relationship with fitness.
Right.
Which I never thought I'd say.
Right.
Because I've always thought every time you go to the gym, sniff pre-workout, try and lift the heaviest thing, try and get a PB every single time, mm-hmm. or run the quickest mile that I ever have. And it doesn't work like that.
Right.
So this is where it's helping me coach and become a better coach, because everything that I've made a mistake with, I've learned from.
Right.
Whether I knew it at the time or not,
mm-hmm.
it's that reflection now that I'm doing. It should be like, oh shit.
Right.
That's good.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because it's also like it's not about like whether something's good or bad, or whether it's like a strength or a liability we have. It just depends on our relationship with it, right? Like that's the thing that we need to like define for ourselves, because like generally like physical activity, taking care of your body, like making sure you're in shape, right? Like that's usually looked at as unequivocally positive thing. But like through the work that you did, what you noticed is like, okay, like, yes, this is a good thing, but it's my relationship with it that is turning it into something that can be negative for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone's seen and heard David Goggins.
Mm-hmm.
I used to speak to myself like that. Fat piece of shit, you're worthless. Just for motivation.
Yeah.
But again, my therapist said, just when you go for a run and it gets a little bit difficult, just tell yourself you can do it. Tell yourself you are good enough. And for me, that change in self-dialogue has made a massive impact.
Mm-hmm.
And when people say, oh, David Goggins is the man, I completely disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love what he's done, and fair play to him. Like, he's inspired so many people to put their best foot forward.
Yeah.
But that language doesn't work for everyone.
And for some, it can be self-destructive.
This guy. It just added to it every single time.
Right. Well, and it's funny because, like, when people are, and myself included, like when we're getting sober, it's all negative motivation. I don't want to feel like shit. I don't want my family to turn their back on me. I don't want to be in trouble with or have legal consequences anymore. It's all fear-based motivation, and that gets our foot in the door. But ultimately, there comes a point where, like, we can't live in a place of fear forever. Because ultimately, like, let's say we stay sober, like, there's less things to be afraid of. And so then what's going to motivate us to keep doing it? Like, eventually we have to, like, take ownership over it instead of, like, wanting to, like, flee a certain feeling or flee a certain circumstance or, like, dialogue in our head. We have to, like, turn it into something positive that actually motivates us, that feels like that it genuinely is more sustainable. And if we get stuck in that negative motivation, like, regardless of whether it's a good thing or not we're doing, like, eventually it's going to be a negative thing.
Yeah, 100%, mate. One question that I do ask everyone is, if you could give one bit of advice to your younger self, what would that be?
That is a loaded question. That's very hard to come up with an answer right on the spot. I think for me, what would have been really helpful to hear from myself is that I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I think a lot of, like, growing up, I was defensive and kind of cynical, kind of solitary in a lot of ways. And I use that as a kind of shield to, you know, and I learned this later, like, it was really fear-based, and I use it as a shield to not have to be connected to people or try to make myself feel like, you know, like, oh, like, I don't want to connect with them. I don't want to do this. And I tried to make it seem like I'm above these things in some way, or like I'm seeing the world differently than them. And I think for me, like, just getting out of my own way and realizing, like, you don't have to prove anything to anyone, and you can just be another person and just be amongst other people. I think that would have really changed the trajectory for me. You know, I can't say for certain. I can't look back and say that that's the case. But, you know, I think if I could have really understood that, I probably heard it, to be honest. But if I could have really understood that, I think it would have been really interesting how things would have played out from there.
Amazing, mate. Well, what a way to wrap it up. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Legend.